No,
Yeah.
and I feel like they already burned through.
But like, I mean, globally, like if you're depending on sort of the global economy, like, you know, one of the worst effects that could come out of the sort of geopolitical instability of the last 3 or 4 years is that we could see more economies that are sort of reoriented towards, you know, a sort of post like pre-World War II, like gearing up, you know, of and stockpiling of, you know, like where you're essentially like trying to like boost up your personnel numbers.
All right. So we are deep in the pocket of talking about Israel-Palestine.
So I see.
Which is certainly, I
There's been some
assume.
developments today as well.
Yeah, Israel is continuing its bombing campaign. Israel is also.
We have an expansion into the southern part of the Gaza Strip.
Yes. Here it is. This is the latest from the New York Times. The Israel-Hamas war. And I wanted to ask you, I mean, you have a lot of experience in this sort of thing.
Urban combat operations. It's nasty. It is a casualty generator on a scale that we have, you know, very little ability to comprehend. Like the just immense, especially whenever you have like constant airstrikes, constant bombardment. I mean, you know, like the door to door, like vehicle, like house to house type stuff can be ugly, but you know, whenever you're like using heavy munitions in any kind of major city, and you know, the kind of heavy munitions that you know, that can be produced, you know, for like high explosive things, you know, for high, you know, so your plastic explosives and your like JDAM type equivalents, like it just, there's no it's like it's hard to comprehend like how devastating this is, but you see like mangled buildings, like the actual photos, not the Adobe generated like fake ones.
Yeah. So let me ask you something. Would you say that Israel has the capabilities of making targeted striking, precise striking, and also even engaging in like door to door?
I've been using, you know, they have armored vehicles. They're pretty standard. They're like a little out of date, like in terms of like comparison to like the stuff that was used in Iraq and Afghanistan that the U.S. used. I think they're upgrading. They're like upgrading it to like have vehicle slats and things like that. But yeah, like it's, I would say that it's very, the problem is that because Israel has essentially had its eyes on Gaza for decades and decades and decades, the amount of information that they know how like is down. It's extremely granular. Like they know where people live. They know where things are. Where things are. It wasn't like the United States coming in and like trying to figure it all out. Like they know the specifics and they sort of have really like really good intelligence. The problem is I think that intelligence shifts and changes as soon as you start to like conduct such a massive operation.
Do you also feel like the fact that they have all of this precise information and also the targeting capabilities and their lack of interest in utilizing that kind of shows the real, like gives the game away? Because it seems like if you have the precise targeting capabilities, if you with your munitions, with your weapons, one example I use is the first building that they blew up in Khan Yunis, where they blew up just the 4th floor. They said it was a high priority Hamas leadership. Let me see if I can find it real quick. But anyway, but the fact that they have those capabilities and do not exercise trigger discipline, if you will, kind of gives the game away that this is not about eradicating Hamas at all, and instead about widespread ethnic cleansing and ethnic displacement that's occurring, which is something that isn't a activist-backed talking point rather than genuine Holocaust and genocide scholars openly showcasing or openly stating that this has the workings of ethnic cleansing, like all of the workings of it.
Right. So I think that one of the things that you see with this particular conflict in particular, and Kaya is she's out of control. Very excited today. But one of the things that you sort of see with with this kind of conflict is that they are, where they could use restraint, they don't, and where, you know, and I think that this is one of the things that sort of even senior American State Department officials have sort of have recognized things that like senior Department of Defense officials like even though Israel's relationship with the United States has historically over the last like 40, 50 years been like, they've been in strict alignment. It was like there was some hesitancy, I think, like in the like after a couple of weeks, of sort of like how they were conducting the operations and sort of like the rhetoric that they were using, like internationally, like not necessarily domestically, but the sort of rhetoric that they were using, and like the actions that they were taking in terms of like, because there's this concept in warfare of there's the Clausewitzian concept of reciprocity, which is that whenever you have a proportional sort of response to the attack, and obviously the attacks on October 7th were a sort of triggering point, and were sort of a really abhorrent sort of attack that you saw that really. Even though Israel sort of had the intelligence ability to collect, they had collected the intelligence to be able to, at least based on the New York Times reporting, to sort of like identify that this was a possibility. It really did shock them into this like into this like sudden like
9/11 style
9/11 style response, and and they've been reacting sort of in a way that is not always as logical and rational as somebody who's like strategically thinking as like a military operator. They're thinking more in the way of like revenge, as in like, and I think the rhetoric is very like, we need to like especially whenever people whenever they're more unfiltered, it is very sort of vengeful language.
Amalek, wipe Gaza. I mean, glass Gaza. Yeah. We're not hitting it hard enough, which is, by the way, consistent with the population, the polling numbers as well. Obviously, this is something we've looked at. Now, what I find really interesting is on December 2nd, 2 days ago, the U.S. Department of Defense, the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd J. Austin III, delivered remarks at the Reagan National Defense Forum. And in those remarks, he actually had a lot of criticisms, a lot of these guys are always going to be very restrained in the language that they use, especially when it comes to regional cooperation with our allies.
And
especially
it's the staunchest ally in the region.
Yeah, especially one as important as Israel. As I've said, Israel is basically a state, and not like a shitty state, but like a cool one that America really cares about. So, of course, his statements here are very quote unquote damning. But what we have been doing behind the scenes, or sometimes very openly, is still offering full support to Israel, sending munitions, shaking the couch cushions. Yeah, shaking the couch cushions to find extra JDAMs or bunker busters. Not JDAMs.
Which there's a shortage of.
Yeah,
there's been a lot of conflicts geopolitically lately that have sort of caused a shortage of weaponry and ammunition, like globally, like Russia's invasion of Ukraine, et cetera. So, like and I think that's another reason why I think that there's only so many. There's an economics to warfare, and that is that there is only so many precision missiles. There's only so many precision weapons that you can develop. And as one of the things that we saw in the early stages of the war in Ukraine was that there was a lot of use of precision weapons and even shelling, and then that sort of went down to like more like just sort of like 1910s era like trench warfare style like warfare. And one of the concerns that I have with sort of like the use of this many precision munitions is that you run out of them. There's only so many that you can produce, and then you end up with I'm very hesitant to use the term that because like
dumb weapons.
Yeah, exactly, dumb weapons, but like
they're artillery.
But they're conventional. They have like basically you shoot it in the general direction, you hope that it hits.
Yeah. Which, by the way, Israel has been using as well. Like they've been using artillery, they've been using tanks.
As they run out, like that's what you have to use. I mean, even in Iraq and Afghanistan, we definitely in the latter parts we had to use more simple, less precision weapons, right?
Okay. So But what I was going to talk about, like I said, is you have Lloyd Austin saying civilians are the center of gravity in the Gaza war.
I've heard that terminology before.
Yeah, well, yeah. You're for those of you who don't know, how would you describe yourself? Because like I kind of just jumped into it.
Right.
Chelsea Manning is a HasanAbi head first and foremost, of course, but she's done some.
And a former Twitch streamer. I streamed for.
Yes. But she's also at the, was at the center of a lot of, controversy.
I have some experience specifically with Iraq and Afghanistan. I deployed to Iraq in 2010, and some events happened in which a lot of material ended up in the public domain.
Helicopters shooting at.
There was a lot of material that was released, and but I also I was an intelligence analyst and I worked in this position and I worked in this role. So I've seen sort of both sides of this now. So I've been in the position of being working for the Department of Defense in the essentially the occupying power of a wartime environment. And I've also been in my later years, I've sort of been more of a humanitarian activist and sort of like engaging in more distantly, like almost. I don't consider myself like a journalist because there are very good journalists who do this very very professionally. Like I'm more of like somebody who for security purpose, for just sort of like intellectual purposes, I just keep track of like combat operations and how they're done. And so I speak and write about sort of like how technology, specifically like tools like artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep neural nets, and predict, and how these sort of technologies have become more pervasive in our lives. Like social media has adopted some of these technologies, and I sort of speak on these matters a lot after being released from prison a few years ago. So
yeah,
I jumped around a little bit. But,
thank you for your service.
Yeah.
So the reason why I wanted to hear your perspective on this is because, like you said, civilians being at the center of gravity in the ethnic cleansing campaign in Gaza is something that it's a statement that you've heard before, and may have even had specific hands-on worked on both sides of it and had like specific hands-on information on adjusting it to rules of engagement. Even with all of its, extremities, even when like rules of engagement are or the American military goes far beyond the modus operandi, the rules of engagement, or the standard operating principles that they put forward. What would you rate Israel's casualty to high priority target? What would you rate Israel's casualty per high priority target assassinations in comparison to like even American military operations?
Yeah, so I don't know what their internal sort of mechanisms are or how they make those kinds of calculations, but we like I would say that in the late 2000s, there was certainly some level of metrics that would be looked at and sort of like whether it's a go or no go for a targeted operation. Targeted operation can either be like missiles, it can be bombing, it can be like an aerial strike, it can be an airstrike, it can be it can be like door kicking. It can be like door kick. Bunch of special operations guys kicking a door and.
Or getting spooked and calling in air support.
Yeah, exactly.
Into a nearby village.
There was because of the scale of the United States military's operations, but they also like the size of a city like Baghdad and the size of a city like Mosul. There was a bit more time to sort of like look at sort of what the weights and metrics are for doing this kind of thing in the latter part of the war. And it would probably be a 24, 48, 72 hour sort of time frame that you would know like what kind of operation that you're going to do. I don't know how they're doing it, but it certainly looks like rather than doing a targeted operation where you're weighing like, okay, are we going to send in guys on the ground? Are we going to do a sort of boots on the ground mission? Are we going to airstrike a position? Like, what is the casualty? Like, what is the what do you call it, collateral damage sort of assessment, right? You know, like I've always been hesitant to use that phrase collateral damage because it really is just a way of being able to justify in your brain, like, oh yeah, like this is the metric for whether or not, you know, innocent people around it could be killed or whatever. And I think that, you know, those like they're obviously using really heavy munitions in a very densely populated area. This is like the level of density, like this is like Sadr City, like which we you know, in eastern Baghdad in the late 2010s or the late 2000s, early 2010s, you know, we were conducting operations and we you know, we tended not to do airstrikes in that kind of vicinity because, you know, like the amount of collateral damage that could be expected in a modern city, in a modern densely populated area like that was just too high. You know, so you would see more, you know, you would see more door kicking operations in a densely populated area like that.
I guess the point I was trying to make or was trying to arrive at is I'm obviously biased in this. I'm no fan of American operations at all. I've been incredibly critical my entire, you know, professional media career of the war crimes that America is engaged in. However, as far as like America's operations in the region, it seems to me like the restraints are so far removed at this point, so unshackled in Israel's day-to-day operations in Gaza, that it makes a lot of even America's involvement in areas like Iraq and Afghanistan look restrained and tame in comparison, even though it certainly was not. I think
the drivers are different too. Like the kinds of, you know, like we you know, it took us years to get into, you know, the mode of being able to like conduct operations in Afghanistan, even though it was like, I think it was like December that we started to conduct operations, but like real on the ground operations didn't really start until early 2002. And then, you know, I was a teenager, so like the whole weapons of mass destruction debate is a little outside my wheelhouse personally. Obviously I have opinions in this area, like whenever it comes to like Bush's invasion of Iraq, but the invasion of Iraq happened like 2 years after 9/11, you know, and then it turns out that it has absolutely no connection to the initial attack. So I think that the speed with which and the ferocity of which this has been done has sort of led to led to a kind of, it's led to operations that I think would be viewed in comparison as more hasty, right? Like, you know, objectively, these are more hasty operations being conducted. Now then, they have a lot more information. Like their information, because they
have round-the-clock surveillance over the course of. I mean, Israel is a belligerent occupier in this circumstance, and they have round-the-clock surveillance that has been ongoing and consistent since 2005 and far beyond before that as well. So therefore, as the belligerent occupier, they have certainly the capabilities of dealing with this, even if they want to in a military fashion, dealing with this in a much more restrained way. It's just that I think that many Israeli leaders have said time and time again that Hamas is a gift for them, so that they can consistently tighten the grip they have over Gaza, or even engage in sieges that they consider mowing the lawn operations over and over again.
And they've done this a number of times, like 2009. You know,
of course, never to this severity.
I mean, also like the number of eyes on this is dramatically different.
Yeah.
Like the amount of, and I've like one of the things that I've noticed in warfare since the 2000s, whenever I was like, you know, working in the U.S. military, is the amount of information that the public has, which is dramatically different. Like people often like ask me like about the secrecy versus transparency debate, and we're now in an age of radical transparency where, you know, information flows very quickly, and you can sort of see this, and so it's shifted the way of because you can't really hide the fact that you are doing these kinds of operations. So what you do is now you have a massive incentive, because it's cheaper to just spread disinformation, spread propaganda. And I think that and, you know, the social media, mobile phones, and the ability of anybody on certain platforms to sort of take part in a debate or to engage in a debate has incentivized sort of like state actors to, when they're conducting whenever they're conducting, things that could be viewed as misdeeds, that their incentive is to entice people to share false information, misinformation, disinformation.
Oh, and Russia did this quite frequently in its invasion of Ukraine, of course.
Yeah. And Ukraine did to an extent.
And Ukraine did as well, yes, in order to keep up in order to, I guess, like better position themselves or to showcase that they were doing a lot better.
It's an information warfare type environment that we live in. It's not, and nothing is local anymore. Like every combat operation that's going to take place between major powers for the next few decades at least is going to be one that involves the entire world, right? It's going to be a social media debate. It's going to be a fight over the truth and what the information is, as opposed to like whether or not something is being hidden from you, because it's not information gets out now. You can see it, like you can see the footage, you can see it right then and there. But now there's like sort of this effect of people like debating about reality and what is true, and you sort of pick sides, you pick a team, and I've seen this happen. I saw this happen with the protests in 2010. I saw this happen with I saw this happen with the war, and we saw this with COVID, like sort of COVID denialism, the election denialism. We've seen this with the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and and this is just an extension of that. But the resources involved, with the United States and Israel and other allying powers is that they have an immense ability to to disincentivize people, or to like have people cut ties with people who say what the objective reality is. And that's one of the most shocking and one of the most alarming things that I've sort of noticed. So I was in Europe for last month. I basically spent most of the last 2 months in Europe, and so I was there in Berlin whenever the protests were whenever protests started to pop off, and the swiftness with which the police forces and the state apparatus sort of like went to engage with that was very fast, and it was very intense, and this is like in Europe, right? So it has this Europe in the United States has this perception of being like a sort of like
free speech haven, kind of liberal Western liberal democracy,
and then I saw this again in London. Like another weekend went by, and this was the one where the I think Home Secretary got sacked for trying to get the police forces to crush the protests. So we're living in a time where information gets out, and then there's like an incentive to just like crush people for speaking out and for sharing information. It's alarming.
There are certainly a lot of disinformation merchants that are out and about on, and I hate to be the both sides guy, but literally on both sides. The difference, of course, I would say, is that the disinformation doesn't come from a centralized force on the Palestinian side, because they do not have like a propaganda outlet that is effective, because they have nothing, in comparison to the Israeli side, where there is of course a massive, openly well-funded Hasbara operation. And despite all that, what I do find very strange is that looking at what Ukraine did in such a short period of time, as far as disinfo goes, looking at what Russia did and has done and has continued to do over the course of many, many years, that they put a lot of effort into, it's shocking how bad Israel's Hasbara operations have been. And I think that there is a weird, there's this weird parallel that I think you can draw on as when we're talking about arrogance.
Yeah.
Because I think that the reason why Israel, for example, thinks it can get away with the Pallywood conspiracies, right? The notion, for those of you who don't know, that Palestinians are simply faking it, like that they're not actually having their children be destroyed.
People arguing this, yeah.
Yeah, like Jerusalem Post is, it's a right wing. It's a right wing paper for the most part, but like the fact that a official Israeli newspaper by the name of Jerusalem Post came out with an article that said this was a doll. This like Al Jazeera was censoring a Palestinian father holding up a doll, and it wasn't a real baby. Was a disgusting form of propaganda that I think average onlookers will look to and go, what the fuck? Why? Like, we can see it with our own two eyes, what the devastation that you've caused in Gaza. I don't think the Palestinians need to make up more severe war crimes that you are actively championing and openly stating that you're doing, and even, showing that you're doing. And yet it still was something that they went along with until Jerusalem Post came out and apologized for it. Why do you think they're so bad at propaganda?
What would incentivize them to look, to like do their homework and to like come up with a more like a complex plan, right?
I think more so this stuff. I mean, it's like,
it's the biggest problem that they sort of have is they're suffering from success, really, right? They've been able to sort of do whatever they've wanted to do, and so they don't have the incentive to nobody's ever really countered that way. I think it first started in 2014. Like, we saw this, like, it was the first time that the sort of like Western states that sort of been like, hey, wait a second, what's going on, right?
And it really peaked in 2021.
Yeah,
which was a turning point when
it scared the IDF. It scared it scared the Israeli intelligence services for sure. But I don't think that they are. It's the suffering from success meme where they've just sort of like they've assumed that they don't need to do that and to have something that is extremely effective anymore.
Yeah. No, it's like Henry Kissinger. Everybody talks about how wonderful
they're trying now to adjust,
triangulate.
They're adjusting their tactic. I mean, one of the things that I've heard is that they're bringing people to think tanks right now. They're grabbing people from think tanks and from senior university faculties to view videos of footage from October 7th, for instance.
Oh yeah.
So
that's been like the major. That's been, I think, the most powerful form like of propaganda is to just like show October 7 over and over again and recycle that.
Yeah.
So that they can continue.
And to be clear, it's become sort of a meme at this point, like condemn violence and condemn the
yeah,
the
of
attack,
course, yes.
So I don't want to discount that. I mean, there is a point where it's the Clausewitzian sort of like reciprocity and the principles of proportionality, and the idea. Like the thing that worries me and that alarms me the most is that I don't know what their end state goal is, right? Because they say one thing and they keep moving that goalpost. Like, first they say they're only going in the northern part, and now they're going into the southern part. Like, when does this, how far does this go? And I think that's the thing to keep an eye on as things progress, because I think that this is going to continue for quite some time. There's no indications from where I'm sitting that that Israel is
what was
is
it
just
2
going
years?
in and out.
I think it was literally. Was it this? Hold on. No, it wasn't this. But I've seen
years. Yeah.
No. It wasn't even that. That's like hunting down the Hamas operatives or Hamas leadership in other foreign countries. But no, there has been. There have been so many different talking points about how long this will take. Oh, we're not interested in annexation. We actually want to just eradicate Hamas. And then, oh, this war will only wage on until we finish Hamas, until we finish the job. Or even like it'll take a couple months. Like,
I do think that they must understand that they have a clock ticking in terms of what they can do before. Finally, Western European countries and countries like the United States, Canada, Australia start to question that. And obviously, a NATO member spoke out today with Aragon,
but that's like
he has a position.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about like a lot of. I think that Australia and England are more significant than Turkey is. But obviously, the big player in the room that can shut this off, shut the violence faucet off tomorrow if they wanted to, is America. It wouldn't be without retort and maybe even some violence directed in our direction. I would even go so far as to say that, potentially, judging by what Israel has done in the past, I mean. However, Turkey has no say in the matter, and they have been a regional ally to Israel, offering material support to Israel, and also, a lot of the oil that goes into Israel directly goes through Turkish pipelines that pass through from Azerbaijan to Turkey to Israel. So, of course, it's all just a show for his own audience, and I liken it to the Gulf nation leadership, like the genuine interest that Gulf nation states have in having, security contracts with America, aligning with America, getting F-16s and the like, while simultaneously, like, the populations are obviously pro-Palestine, so they have to, play this song and dance. However, it does seem like, I think, some semblance of permanent occupation is going to be what's going on. I mean, they're blowing up the government buildings. Like, you don't do that. You don't blow up civil society and ministries unless you're.
But they did that in Beirut in the 1980s, and they never fully occupied. So.
I mean, well, I was about to say, I remember another country that blew up all the ministries, and with the exception of, energy. I guess with the exception of energy. And that you could tell.
I was in an Iraqi Ministry of Defense building that we just called the JDAM building.
Yeah,
you could just walk through, and then in the middle there was you could see in one of the rooms you could go up and see the.
Yeah, so that goes to show that there is no real interest in rebuilding a country at all, or even allowing it to exist as an autonomous region. If looking at America's involvement in the area and looking at Israel.
Yeah, I do think that there is some real. I think that the more realistic folks in particularly the IDF, not necessarily the ministerial leadership or anything like that, but I think that some of them must fully understand that there's a time limit to how long they can conduct this before they start to see the effects of the pipelines of fuel, of weapons, because it's like there's only, and also there's a short, they're asking for things that there are shortages of in the world right now.
Well, the one partner that's getting cooked in this entire thing is Ukraine, it seems. Yeah. Where the American leadership
it's drawing a lot of attention away from it. Yeah.
The American leadership has openly stated that there is a end to the unlimited funds that Ukraine has received thus far.
Yes.
That by the end of this year, unless Congress acts, we just simply don't have any more money in the couch cushions for Ukraine, any more weapons in the couch cushions for Ukraine. So that's one thing that came out earlier today. That was a big news story. And then, of course, on the propaganda side, obviously people are no longer as interested in what's going on in Ukraine. That, of course, came as a consequence of the counteroffensive failing as well, or at least being considered an abject military failure, and nowhere near as.
It wasn't successful.
It was not.
No.
It's
turned into a Ukraine, as I said in 2022. It wasn't. They were not the Russians trying to invade and take over the entire country was never going to happen. But they certainly have been able to cause a stalemate in the four sort of, I forget what they're called, they're the county equivalents.
Oblast.
Oblasts. Yeah,
LPR, DPR, and
exactly.
And most of
because they're no longer republics.
Yeah. So. So I don't know where that goes. I mean, do you have any I don't know. I told you we could potentially talk about Ukraine as well, but you said you're more read up on.
Well, I did a little reading up on Ukraine this morning, and it's been stalemate. We've been in stalemate for about a year and a half now.
One of the things that I was mentioning,
apart from Bakhmut, and I think that I forgot. If you don't read up on this stuff constantly, you start to forget some of the names.
The U.S. could soon run out of money to send weapons to Ukraine if Congress does not approve additional emergency funds, the White House has said. I think that we always... Would you say that this is an accurate assessment? I'm going to ask you a question. Where America always has, it's emergency oil reserves. We always have, emergency weapons. No. I'm saying, we always have, some extra bombs that we can, always find under the couch cushions that we can deliver hastily over without, too much... congressional interference,
right?
That we have been basically shipping over now to Israel rather than Ukraine, and that's the reason why
the reserve stockpiles. I mean, I have certainly there's only so many munitions that you can ship out. Like here's the reality that I think is geopolitically significant, like globally, and that is that when you have major wars like Russia's invasion of Ukraine, when you have Israel, when you have Israel's sort of bombing campaign in Gaza, and invasion there, there's only so many weapons and so many, more importantly, ammunition. There's only so much ammunition that you can produce and still maintain a peacetime economy. So at some point, something has to give. Either you have to end operations, or you have to slow operations down, or you have to start, doing conscription, start nationalizing,
well, I think Ukraine already did that, no?
Yeah.
And I feel like they already burned through.
But globally, like if you're depending on sort of the global economy, like, one of the worst effects that could come out of the sort of geopolitical instability of the last 3 or 4 years is that we could see more economies that are sort of reoriented towards, a sort of post like pre-World War II, like gearing up, of and stockpiling of, like where you're essentially like trying to like boost up your personnel numbers and get your and start focusing on like what reserves and things that you can get, and also start shifting away from, a consumer-based economy to one of wartime production.
According to Zelensky, the shell supply to Ukraine has been slowed down by the Israel-Hamas war.
Yep.
Ironic because, like,
global problem too.
Yeah, I mean, we already were tapping into South Korean resources from the jump. Like, this was happening even before October 7th. So the fact that this was inevitable. This was an inevitability. Ukraine is running out of manpower to be able to hold weapons even, and seemingly Russia, for one reason or another, has like an almost endless supply of like conscripts that they can throw into the murder machine, and that has become a major issue for Ukraine, as far as I understand. Like, things that I've read on the ground operations from Ukrainian forces, this is like their major issue, is that they're running out of, one, experienced soldiers, and two, there's only so much you can do when they just have a lot more people. Like, they have a lot more people that they will throw into positions to just like hold it. And I guess like one of the things I've talked about from the jump that got a lot of criticism from pro-NATO YouTubers, if you will, and many others, was that I kept talking about the Minsk agreements and like reinforcing the Minsk agreements, or at least the 15-point potential peace plan that was talked about in Turkey that fell apart, and this was like fairly early on. Yeah. And I think that ultimately we are going to inevitably arrive at, with America's backing, maybe not that exact same plan, but something similar to that, where if Zelensky has to maneuver through this process, he's going to have to make concessions that involve, I would say, passing the buck, like the Crimea question 15 years into the future, or like somewhere in the future, that he doesn't have to immediately take it up to a vote. Yeah. Because, that's not, obviously the Ukrainians are going to say fuck no to that overall. And they've considered it. They've, there's been, like, certainly in late 2022, like, I think the Zelensky government at least, sort of was exploring what an agreement would look like, because there's only so many. There's only so many. Like, there's only so much war that you can have. Like, you can't constantly have battle after battle after battle, right? And like maintain like the kind of society that you are able to continue to have. Whereas Ukrainian society hasn't they've made an enormous amount of sacrifice in terms of like defending their positions. I don't know if they're willing. I don't know how willing Ukraine is to do this for 15 years. Right? Yeah, and Russia's obviously teetering on the brink, so they're very willing to do that. And I don't know. And I think that eventually at some point the stalemate is going to break. Either and it's going to happen. It's going to happen either because of political reasons, because the political will on one of the sides has gone away, or there just isn't enough resources and logistics to maintain the civilian population of your respective country. Yeah, I think that overall, the most, I think, like, if we're going to look at a list of like likely scenarios here, the absolute worst one that I foresee, that I've talked about from literally the first day of the Russian invasion, is that hyper, like, ultra nationalist right wing forces that have been seen understandably as like the emancipatory forces in the region are going to have a lot more space to maneuver politically, and will, if they see Zelensky concede to the Russian invaders, will be able to either, under the watchful eye of the United States, well, nothing really happens without the United States knowing about it, but will be able to create a massive opposition, maybe even terror, with U.S. arms that they now have and control, and with the U.S. logistics and support that they have had for a very long time in their battle against the Russian invaders. They will now be able to turn those crosshairs onto not necessarily the Ukrainian public, but like Ukrainian officials, and gain prominence and power within Ukraine, making the situation really, really damaging for the civilian population.
Yeah, and there's no way that you can contain that regionally, I don't think. That becomes, because of the information environment that we have with the internet and with social media, I think that like that becomes a regional problem very quickly. Like especially whenever you have refugees, and when you have people who have fled who have fled Russia, people who have fled Ukraine, people who and the sort of intense I don't want to say exhaustion of Eastern European states, because there's definitely a lot of
interest in supporting Ukraine.
There's a lot of interest in supporting, but like there's that only goes for so long, and that there might be a sense of like betrayal among people who had staunch support at one moment, and then that support sort of waning because of there's only so much capacity that people have to help in that situation. And then Ukraine, Ukraine, I think has lost a little bit of political capital, in the fact that it's been shown to be sort of one of the actors that involved in the pipeline attacks.
The
Nord Stream attacks.
Yeah, no, there's
there's a lot of Central European countries to be like, I don't know.
Yeah. A lot of like expenditure of political capital that they had, as they went far beyond the boundaries of what the American state would allow them to, in a sense where, like, when there's supposed to be 100% support for the actions of Ukraine, you even saw the American State Department openly, publicly criticize Ukrainian forces time and time again. The Nord Stream pipeline explosion, in my opinion, still, of course, had like an American signature in it, but publicly, it's definitely, I would say publicly.
Personally, I don't think the U.S. knew.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think so. I think that that slipped through the cracks. But that's my personal opinion. That's my personal opinion.
I think more so it's like stuff like
they were like, oh,
blowing up the Crimean Bridge and like things of that nature, that, or targeting like civilian areas that are like Russian areas where like civilians live. Like I remember reading time and time again. I
think they had the pieces to put that together, but didn't.
Yeah. Well, regardless, it's just it was ridiculous that from the jump, America was like trying to piece it together by being like, oh, Russia must have blown it up themselves, and then like that in and of itself, I think, kind of shows that America maybe wasn't as involved with that, because like if they were, they would have probably had better counter propaganda immediately ready to go than Russia did it.
But one thing that I noticed was that the UK was pretty quiet. So I don't know.
Maybe. That could definitely. I mean, the UK after the United States has been incredibly bloodthirsty in like constantly championing endless conflict in this region. So ultimately, though, I don't know where this goes. Like I said, the worst case scenario is like Zelensky tries to be the guy who negotiates a American-backed settlement here, I don't know what the country lines look like with respect to like all the positions that Russia has advanced into Ukraine now. If there is even a return to like a Minsk style autonomous region for LPR DPR, or if Russia will continue a permanent annexation, which I think is understandably a non-starter for Ukrainians. Like, why the fuck would they allow that to happen? That's completely unacceptable.
What about like we've talked about Israel Palestine, we've talked about Ukraine and Russia. What about the United States and China in this? Because like because like I feel like all of this is connected like globally as a part, like because these are sort of like poles, and they're all just sort of like lining up in terms of positions. Like what about?
Well, I think that there's no better time for China to just take over Taiwan than now. If they were,
but they're the manufacturer of the world's chips, of like your graphics cards over here.
No, I know. Didn't the U.S. State Department say something at NVIDIA like literally today? Hold on, let me see if I can find it. Let's see.
And AI is
heavily... look, they did 14 hours ago. U.S. issues warning to NVIDIA, urging NVIDIA gets a warning from the U.S. Commerce Secretary. If you redesign a chip around a particular cut line that enables them to do AI, I'm going to control it the very next day, says the U.S. Commerce Secretary. I guess it's not so much about China, but instead about AI specifically.
Yeah, it's become a security issue. It's become a national security issue.
Yeah.
It was before it was a consumer device issue. Now that, with the generative AI boom and, a new, like the ability to fly, the ability to fly and run vehicles around the horizon autonomously in military vehicles and to be able to make decision making on the ground.
Mark, the gospel is what you're referencing, right? Like
exactly.
The Israeli targeting system. It's insane.
Like it's become a national security issue, and it's become a security issue for everyone, right? And all like 90% of the world's like best chips are made in Taiwan. So like I feel like all of this personally, I think everybody wants me to talk. Like everybody, like when they're asking about stuff, they want to talk about a specific region. But like I'm just looking at the global powers like move pieces on the board like before bigger stuff happens, and that's the thing that has me the most alarmed.
So what do you think about the Xi Jinping Brandon conversations that took place recently in America? I mean, he came to San Francisco.
Yeah.
Shouts out the gruesome Governor Gavin Newsom. Who seems to have a decent relationship with Xi.
Yeah.
But he came. I think that they basically reinforced their position where America, I would say, took a much more tempered approach where they said, one China, we're not.
Yeah, that's been the policy.
Yeah, which has been the policy, strategic ambiguity. But China, in opposition to that, very openly said, it does not matter what America's interests are. Taiwan and China will be reunified no matter what, which is like a pretty hard line to take, and then also still continue having like a show of peace with the Biden administration. What do you make of that?
So I think that China is in a stronger negotiating position these days because the Malacca Strait has been extremely important strategically for them. And now the infrastructure and the investments that they've made with the Belt and Road Initiative, which it's been hit or miss in some places, but I think that the Belt and Road Initiative has put them into a position where they have more of where in the future, not right now, but in the coming years, they have more strategic security from being able to have their oil cut off, like in a situation where the U.S. Navy were to like blockade the Malacca Strait or the Strait of Hormuz. So I think that, and also like the China recognizes that the U.S.'s ability to maintain its like technological superiority is now like heavily weighted on the ability to produce chips. To produce three nanometer produced chips, and I think that Taiwan obviously has positioned itself to be the manufacturer of that. Whenever it looked like the world was sort of settling and peaceful, it looked like Taiwan made a lot of sense, and I think that now China recognizes that like that's closer to that the island Taiwan is just closer to China than it is the United States, and how invested, especially whenever the U.S. has been involved in global affairs for decades now, like for decade after decade. And I think that they're reading the tea leaves that the United States is really tired. The United States, like the American population doesn't really have the same sort of appetite for engaging in foreign affairs anymore.
I mean, I don't even know if they have the smoke. I can't believe I'm saying this, but like, I do feel as though we have finally arrived at an age where, like, yeah, we have 800 military bases that we know
and
of.
And the conservatives know that.
But even then, it feels like American forces are spread too thin in numerous conflicts with, like,
Zoomers are not signing up.
And regional actors, regional power players like Russia, like even Turkey, as a matter of fact, or China, which is, beyond a regional power player, but acting as a regional power player, has been able to make moves in a direction that certainly doesn't favor American hegemony. And it seems like every time there's a new front opening up in an endless sea of proxy wars, we are, for the first time ever, without a World War II style like command economy that is fully focused on war, are unable to produce the necessary munitions to keep this up. That's why you see Ukraine and Israel playing hot potato on like who gets to be the one that America is like backing the most.
Yeah.
Because you can print money endlessly, but ultimately you still need commerce. Yeah, we have been doing that, of course, but you still need like an industrial engine to back that up. And
it's not centered in the U.S. anymore.
Yeah. So I don't know.
It's
I
now the
like,
global South is where a lot of the industry is.
Yeah.
And the production capabilities are.
So what do we do in this situation? I don't know. And it's like, look, China is saying there will be a peaceful reunification, no matter what happens.
I think that my personal opinion, my personal assessment is that China doesn't want an open conflict so close.
No, I don't think so.
Territory. Yes. I think that they want to go up against the United States, but they want to go up against the United States while still having a commercial partner, an economic partner. And they just want like regional like control that doesn't have U.S. interference.
Yeah, 100%.
And the U.S. is not in a position to like counter that right now.
Well, the U.S. isn't in a position to counter that in the only way it knows, unfortunately, which is like completely abandoning soft power and like offering Japan unprecedented militarization opportunities and like putting as many fucking missile bases as possible in a circuit of islands that like directly point them in the vicinity of China, in the direction of China, which seems not great. It's not a good thing to do, obviously, but it's also I don't know. A conversation that they had was actually towards denuclearization. Obviously, it's not going to happen, but like China as a counter to that has also really beefed up, as far as I understand, its nuclear armaments, right?
As a negotiating.
Yeah, as a way to say,
what's
like,
the Hasan rule?
Yeah, nuclear proliferation is a necessity. The HasanAbi doctrine. Get nukes, and if America suspects you of having nukes or claims you have nukes, drop everything and get the nukes, right?
Yeah.
So that's what China has been doing. And China was the leader in that conversation against America, saying, we want to put a halt to the nuclear proliferation, but you also have to demilitarize this region that you have been greatly beefing up.
South China Sea.
Yeah, in the South China Sea. And it seemed like America was interested in conceding, but I mean, what America says and what America does, especially with China, are two different things.
It's just I've just noticed a lot of the rhetoric, right? I've just noticed that like there's been a pump up of rhetoric, whenever it comes to like the United States, like just has been engaging in more rhetoric, even whenever at the same time like they're still inviting Xi over to like to speak, right, and to like have West Coast luncheons, right?
Yeah. But overall,
like what was that?
trade
What was
relation-
that? Was it Biden? Was it Biden? That somebody called him a dictator recently. Was it Biden?
It was Biden.
Yeah.
It was Biden immediately after Xi had left in a press conference where they were like, "So do you think Xi's a dictator?" He's like, "Yeah, Xi's a dictator." And then you watch Blinken's POV on that, and he's like, "Oh fuck! Like, oh no! Like, what are you doing?"
So what happens next year?
Well, Biden has played fast and loose with its involvement with China like time and time again throughout his presidency, where you do chalk it up to him being senile over and over again. I think Chinese leadership understands that.
Yeah.
Like, it's less of like a Mad Men theory, Nixon style, like Mad Men theory, and more like literally delirious old man theory.
Yeah.
Where Brandon's diplomacy is more akin to like late stage Alzheimer's Ronald Reagan, where he's just like kind of saying whatever the fuck comes to mind, and then everyone's like, "Okay, I'm so sorry he said that."
So I'm gonna close this out with a question to you.
All right.
Like, tomorrow, like next year, 2024,
Mm-hmm.
it's an election year. Why does it feel like this election cycle just doesn't have as much energy as like previous election cycles?
I think everyone is so tapped out. They don't. It's being positioned as like a Trump versus Brandon, election cycle. Donald Trump has a litany of crimes that he has to address in the American criminal justice system, which will be interesting to follow through on. But like even he's more low energy than he has been.
Yeah.
Because when Trump first came out swinging,
Everything, he's just a grievance, and he's just
Yeah.
a grievance machine. Like I don't hear
But-
like
but
when
when
you
he
heard in
first-
2016, like he would say things that would resonate with
Yeah.
his audience. But now he's just like I'm the most the most oppressed president ever.
he had a very good way of connecting like his own personal grievances with what he understood was the grievances held by, maybe it was a misdirection, but the grievances
Yeah.
that people thought they had with like elites, right? Now, after 4 years of Donald Trump and 4 years of Joseph Robinette
He
Brandon,
just has less riz.
he has much less riz. On the Democratic Party side, we have nothing. Like, Biden is the only person that's like less popular in his own party than Donald Trump is in his own party, and it's crazy. It's crazy, but like I think a lot of young people have completely tapped out. They see
Yeah.
it. They noticed maybe in during COVID
Yeah.
and during the Black Lives Matter protests, like they went out, they took it to the streets, they
Nothing
protested,
happened.
and nothing came of that. So now they're like, well, what the fuck am I supposed to do? Like this shit
Yeah.
doesn't work. And they're probably experiencing that again. The ones who are going out and protesting for
Gen Alpha,
Palestine.
yeah.
Like it's just America, and American politics is a
And this
one party
is from
state.
this is from a Democratic administration as well.
Yeah. It's a one-party state. It's
Yeah.
just the unfortunate reality. Like, the American government is going to do whatever it needs to do that it thinks is, like, the most compelling, most important things that it needs to do. That's why you see Joe Biden continuing the wall,
Yeah.
even though he ran against it. There's obviously, like, some really good things that the Biden administration has done. Maybe not directed by Biden, but at least Biden has, like, gotten out of the way of the
infrastructure
NLRB.
bill.
And yeah, the IRA was decent. Like it's pretty good, all things considered. However, the same economic considerations that the broader population had, black and brown people, less educated populations, people living in rural areas, like these conditions have not changed. We look at everything and mark it on a post-COVID. We look at it and we grade it on a curve where we look at like, well, post-COVID, like and pre-COVID in comparison to 2019, like the economy has recovered to 2019 levels, forgetting that there was a reason. But also forgetting that there was a reason why Bernie was so popular in 2016. Obviously, he was going up against Hillary Clinton, which was very unpopular. However, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren gaining any sort of prominence within the Democratic Party can only happen as a consequence of the volatility that people feel, the economic instability that people feel in their day-to-day lives. And I think we've completely lost track of that. We've completely lost sight of that when we look at the economy and we grade it on like, well, post-COVID, we finally recovered.
Yeah,
so why are people still upset?
Points. They're looking at percentage points and not like the metrics of like people's ability to be able to be upwardly mobile, to be able to the purchasing power of people has dramatically gone down. Right. And I felt this, right. It's just like people, like, things are more expensive. Your income hasn't really gone up for the vast majority of people unless you have stonks and, you have like a gazillion, like you have equities and mutual funds, like up the wazoo. Like, it's just like for the average person, like the price of milk and the price of gas and the price of, and
it's not going to go down because inflation is like getting a grip on inflation doesn't mean that like prices go down. That would be deflation. So obviously there's like, people probably expect that to happen, but that's not going to happen unless
the talking point of the administration, like for the election cycle, has just been like, oh well, the economy's doing well, like on paper, sure, but like you've been adjusting those numbers for years,
and also the economy
unemployment's low.
But also the irony is that like the economy is always doing well on paper since, in perpetuity.
Since 2009.
Yeah, the economy's been doing great since 2009. It's always on the up and up. It's always growing, explosive growth, except it's
COVID
never
and like
with minor blips. But my point is like it doesn't really translate to how people feel about the economy, and it's weird because like I think there was a point in time before COVID where like economists were trying to come to terms with the why.
Yeah,
it's not translating to people feeling like the economy is doing well. But now I feel like we've lost sight of that completely, and just grade on this like weird curve. Like
it can't help that we have FOMO every time we look at social media. People.
Yeah, sure that might be a part of it, but I do think that the most important things that people need to purchase for survival, like the price of that going up steadily, or the most important things for upward social mobility, like education, higher education being insanely, unimaginably expensive. Healthcare, higher education, and shelter are three of the most important things for both survival and also upward social mobility.
Yeah.
Those three things have no control.
No.
They are completely off the fucking rails with respect to affordability. And yet there's, leaders are not looking at that and saying we have to rein this in. It's not just the egg prices, not just the milk prices, which are important. Yeah. Certainly, of course, commodities are important, like food. But these other things we have no interest in even trying to deal with. And people are still experiencing the shocking price, the expansion of prices on those areas. And that's going to cause them to be very unhappy about the situation.
All right. It's 6 minutes past the hour.
All right. Yeah. I'm going to run the 3-minute ad break now, which the price of which has not changed. Thank you, Chelsea Manning, for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you
American
so much.
hero.
Kaya's gotten so big, by the way.
She's
just
ginormous.
a gigantic doggo.
Look at the way she's standing right there.
Yeah, like literally bigger than me.
Yeah, she just like lays and chills all day like that.
How much does Kaya weigh now?
Like around 90 pounds, I think, close to 90 pounds.
That's almost as much as me. I weigh like 115 pounds.
Oh yeah, no, we'll see what she might grow even larger than you then.
All right,
well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, is there anything you want to promote before you leave? Is there anything you want to promote?
Is there anything I want to promote? You know what? I think I'm good. I think I'm just kind of keeping it low key and chill.
You got a memoir?
I do have I have readme.txt. That's my memoir that came out. It's in paperback. I haven't really been promoting it. It's also an Audible. Like if you're like me and you're lazy, and just you listen to books at